Geoengineering is manipulating the weather, and it's doing it through various technologies by spraying metal particulates in the atmosphere, very fine metal powders like aluminum and barium and strontium, sometimes other things. But it's also being used as a vector for biowarfare, which we've been in an era of biowarfare for a couple of decades at least now, really more than that. But it's really come to people's attention, of course, since COVID. But I've been teaching about bioweapons for about 16 years. So geoengineering is part of that vector where it can be used for weather warfare, which is being used extensively on Earth. When you see a lot of the weird stuff going on, for example, like the Texas freezes last year that knocked out, their power grid and stuff like that, and rice crops getting knocked out, like half the U.S. rice crop was knocked out at the beginning of COVID, I think, which was weather warfare, China retaliating against the United States for us doing the same thing to their rice crop. So geoengineering is one of the methodologies for doing weather modification. And publicly, you can actually get degrees in it, believe it or not. It's not at all a conspiracy theory. Some people call them chemtrails. And, the mainstream science calls that a conspiracy theory. But geoengineering is not at all a conspiracy theory. You can get doctorate level degrees in geoengineering from places like Harvard and Oxford and other universities around the US and around the world. So it's very much a new frontier being presented as, oh, we've got to do something about climate change and, that kind of thing, which is all a smokescreen. It's bogus because we have technologies and have had technologies for many, many years to balance the weather and to even start or stop a pole shift. And so I've worked with a lot of advanced technologies over the years and have seen these technologies. So I'm not reading conspiracy theories on the internet. And the problem is when you're ahead of the curve, everybody thinks you're crazy, as you mentioned. I've been teaching about this stuff for 20 some years, and it's only been in the last couple of years with all the insanity of this so-called pandemic that people are starting to wake up to the reality of the technological advances that are being used for warfare and for population control or reduction and all kinds of things. So in a nutshell, that's what geoengineering is. It's weather manipulation through a bunch of different technologies, not just spraying metal particulates in the atmosphere. There's also technologies called scalar interferometers, which are energy devices. They're large antenna arrays, which actually these days have gotten much smaller than they used to be, that can inject huge amounts of energy into the atmosphere and change the weather radically very quickly, create storms, stop storms, and all that kind of stuff. And part of the reason I know about this stuff is because I developed technologies to counteract that. And so I've developed technologies that will actually balance the weather and clear the chemtrails and the geoengineering pollutants out of the atmosphere. And I've had 4 attempts on my life for doing so. So, the reality of it is much, much bigger than most people would even want to believe. But it's definitely out there, and it's going on constantly.
So as you're talking, obviously this weather engineering that is happening is a detriment to our world. Are you telling me that the whole theory behind climate change and we need to be changing our ways of living for climate change, that's the mantra, that they could actually be doing geoengineering to help the climate or for the good of humanity, and they're not? They're doing it for the detriment.
Yes, yeah, it's exactly what I'm saying. And climate change is a real thing. It's a combination of different things. Space weather, number one, I would say, because it's not just our planet that's excuse me, that's being affected. There's all of the planets in our solar system are being affected by space weather because we're going through bands of high energy in the area of the galaxy that we're passing through now, and so that's affecting our weather quite a lot. But then, of course, man-made pollution and a lot of things that we're doing is throwing off the ionic charge in the atmosphere and throwing off the heating in the atmosphere and that kind of stuff. And geoengineering actually makes it worse because when you spray these metals in the atmosphere, it acts like an insulating blanket They call it solar reflective management. And the idea is that you spray these particles in the atmosphere and it reflects the sun from hitting the surface of the earth, and therefore it cools the earth down. But what they don't say is that it also heats the earth up, because on the opposite side of the planet, on the dark side, at nighttime, it warms the planet up because it's like an insulating blanket. So, and it just absolutely destroys the atmosphere. It really, really throws off the ionic charge in the atmosphere. But yes, they could be using this to help the situation on Earth. And instead of using toxic heavy metals, they could be spraying the Earth with volcanic rock powders, which Earth naturally does through volcanism, and radically improve plant growth and crop growth around the world and the quality of our soils. And they could be using scalar interferometry with the right frequencies to help prevent and balance the weather rather than throw it off and use it for warfare. And I know that for a fact because I've done it many, many, many times. So I'm not speaking about theory here.